Temple of the Way of Light retrospective, final ceremony, ceremony 6, love. Again, the mistake of having expectations of Aya. The French guy Jan from the permaculture section of the temple, who was logging everyone's 8 a.m. plant medicine, commented about the final ceremony tonight. He said, "It's beautiful." Well, some of it was, but not all by any means. Like the immense feeling of unconditional love that was like a gathering of Tolkien's spiritual elves for a festival of beauty, love, and light. But it was overall the hardest ceremony yet. Why? Because love is complicated, has many facets, and can be extremely painful, especially when withdrawn from us. All these lessons were contained in this last ceremony, from examples of past relationships that contained elements of true love, whatever that means to an individual, but not unconditional love. I was shown past examples of my life's relationships when love was offered genuinely but not seen by me, so rejected and acted upon with jealousy or seen as betrayal or trust loss after a relationship was over, but the person still cared for me but was worried about my self-destructive behavior. Again, my back was broken as the night before and my stomach in turmoil again, seemingly because of another large glass of Aya, 3/4 of the amount of the previous night. To avoid the quantity confusion of the night before, I asked Maestra to decide my amount so I was not open to feeling responsible for reckless behavior. After setting my usual intention, let Mama decide what's best for me, and swallowing the large glass, I knew it would be another long night, which it was, with conversations with Mama going on till 4 a.m., 2 hours after the ceremony was over. Everyone the day after said it was a really hard ceremony. Of course it was. Love is the most important component in our very being. Its presence or absence will determine our life path for better or absolute traumatic worst. Most who come here suffer from CPTSD from some form of non-functional MPD-type parentage, the inability of the parent to give unconditional love to their children. I was given many examples of different love types from my past relationships as comparisons of what was perceived love but never unconditional love, so as to differentiate the worlds of the ego-based human realms, for the most part due to the limits of human fallibility. Brackets, except healthy parents who do show unconditional love for their kids. To the spiritual realm where unconditional love is all that exists in the realm of supreme consciousness. Even my relationship with Louise, the longest and most stable I have ever had, 9 years, that I was sure was an example of unconditional love, when looking back fondly on our 9 years together, was realized when processed the next day to be an example of symbiotic conditional love or contractual love, as most human relationships are. We split in part of her desire to have children one day when I did not want that, though my increasing CPTSD behavior was a large part in that split too. I still loved her, but I was not in love with her anymore, possibly a subconscious psychological attempt to run away from responsibility I subconsciously knew I couldn't handle. One of the most powerful experiences yet by far in any Aya ceremony, except for the usual worst levels of fear that you can possibly imagine, was being shown what love is not. My visions were so strong it was overwhelming again. Even when I opened my eyes, my eyesight was vibrating with circles of fractal colors from the Aya quantity, Chakruna mix, and the power of the shamanic magic. Open eyes usually diminish visual effects vision effects markedly. I was again presented with a vision of Signor. This time there was no conversation, but worse, no presence of Mama either. For protection, not good. I was physically, psychically, and spiritually vibrating in the weirdest, most uncomfortable way, being pulled like I imagine gravitational waves to feel like, toward him, with the sensation growing in power the closer I got to him, the force being exponentially stronger toward a fate I couldn't possibly imagine. Suddenly, Mama appeared and pulled me out back to her presence. She said, "Now do you understand why you must never ever talk to him ever again? Your boyish curiosity, manners, and respect was allowed before, but for the first and only time. Once you have his attention, he will continue this interaction so he can tempt you and draw you in. You learn that tactic with his children at Kapatari when Jack's demons threw back your helpful advice, mockingly, regarding forgiveness of his mother." Mama explained this lesson was shown to me so I would fully understand, just as importantly, the damage done to people by the absence of unconditional love, as I had just experienced, being sucked helplessly towards his black hole of nothingness and despair, as the experience of unconditional love is absolutely essential for the optimum health and well-being of any child. I sat up from my mat to gain some reality after this encounter. The atmosphere had seemed to change in the Maloka to a quieter, darker mood after the previous sighs of beauty and love that Summers had experienced earlier. I felt guilty that I had been responsible for the change due to my encounter and that his presence had spoiled their show. It took about 10 minutes and the arrival of the shaman to sing me my Icaro for my mood to change to focus on this song, relieved for the distraction. Soon I heard Austin laughing, and I too grinned stupidly in the dark as revelations of mistaken past partner interactions were shown for how they were meant. God, it was right in front of my face all the time, and I refused to see it. These interactions concerned genuine care from past partners for my past binge drinking, self destructive behavior, but I had perceived them as cynical attempts to remove that person from guilt or obligation to remain in a relationship with me. I was then shown events when that same person had come back to me years later to reconnect and see how I was, but couldn't accept their concern for me, seeing it as a cynical attempt to use me again financially or seem to appear as genuine in front of others for their own devious ends. This negative view was the core of my last 12 years of self-isolation from further relationships, the inability and desire to risk receipt of affection for fear of being further hurt, building the all too common walls of emotional self-defense so many of us do to save further emotional harm. This was shown clearly against my ability to give massive amounts of genuine love and concern for people I bond with over my inability to accept it or give it to myself. This is a common condition in many people. Mary Martha is a good example. I never spoke to her all week as I could sense her fear and extreme inability to connect due to total lack of ability to show anything of herself most of the first week until her healing started. Only today, as I write this after we left the temple back at the drop-off hotel, did I find myself in front of her after hugging others goodbye. Did she acknowledge me and give me a hug? I told her I was so happy that she had reached a point of healing where she felt confident enough in all of us to show her feelings and not fear risking making connections with people. Mary formed a close bond with a bit older girl, Dr. Ashley, who had similar poor parental experiences, and it was interesting to note that Ashley, who was next to me in all the ceremonies, told me that they even shared the same physical manifestations of their trauma, like acid reflux and ability and inability to form loving relationships with partners. Mary had said she thought there must be something so wrong with her that she was evil, as the cause of other people disliking her so much in her school days. What people rarely convey in their YouTube videos about Aya is the amount of insight given each night, with questions answered immediately if asked, if Mama so wishes that interaction. It's truly mind-bending. Most accounts focus on the visual experience as if it's a comparison to LSD or magic mushrooms is the important part. So misguided. It's the insights and visual models you may receive that seem to give your brain a way to materialize a subconscious trauma experience. So your conscious mind can focus on something, then deal with it in some way. So then overwrite the memory for good, hopefully. It allows a way to experience the root cause of your particular issue, but in a very mystical way for sure. I've only had that insight during my first week of integration back at my hotel after. It's a good theory though, and it works for me. Don't know what psychologists will make of that though. The fact is that most forms of trauma manifest as physical symptoms and illness in the body somewhere, but that shamanic healing magic is real and works for many people who are prepared, or just at the end of their tether with no other choice but suicide as an escape from their issues, to take a leap of faith and understand that these practices have been around for thousands of years or more, are tried and tested, and have been deliberately hidden and destroyed by the dark forces that control society at its core. My back pain and eczema are almost gone, but most importantly, the spontaneous, illogical anxiety and fear trigger mechanisms that used to hijack me daily seem to be a bad memory, though I haven't been tested in a real world environment of work or obligations just yet. I still know I have some healing issues to attend to, like bad habit, negative thought processes from the past that can happen in just daily interactions. Frustrating, persistent street sellers here in Iquitos, for example. Daily meditation and pipe smoking reflections help immensely during this period of healing and sealing of the magic that was imparted to us, fortunate enough to have had a positive experience of Aya, and what it and the shamans can accomplish. It's a truly wondrous thing. Mystical, mysterious, yes. Requiring faith, yes. But the proof is in the healing of countless others beside myself, if you care to listen and research. Spirituality and magic exists, and it's a gift of awareness of this fact, given probably to the shamans via other plants, is nothing short of a miracle.